I believe most of the people that wanted to be here are here now. So let's all get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Marketing in the Real World webinar organized by TAMID and Marketing and More. This webinar is being hosted exclusively for the members of these two clubs, so I'm sure that there'll be a lot of marketing secrets to be shared here today. Before we begin, I'd just like to thank Humera, the co-president of TAMID, for doing a lot of the heavy lifting to organize this event and for bringing us all here today. Now, let me take a little bit of a time to introduce the speakers for today, who will be taking us through the wondrous world of marketing and consulting, and there's a lot more for us to uncover today. So the moderator for today's webinar is Ms. Pawena. She is currently the SEO executive at iProspect, Dentsu. She is responsible for accelerating growth in the media arena. Welcome, Pawena. We're so happy to have you here today.
I'm pleased to be here as well.
Thank you. Okay, great. We also have here with us Natalia Doshi. She is a client marketing executive at Transmission. She manages and leads client relationships with a focus on consultancy and strategy. We're so glad to have you here, Natalia.
Excited to be here.
Hi. And last, but definitely not the least, we have with us Rohan Bhatia. Hello. He is a strategist at RGA, a digital agency, and is responsible for creating a more human future for brands. That sounds just amazing. And I'm sure we're all excited to learn more about what that means. So welcome, Rohan.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So as you all can see, we have three wonderful people here with us today from three very different areas who will be taking us through the world of marketing and consulting and answering any questions that all of you might have in this area. So hope you're all ready to learn and enjoy because I sure am. So over to you, Pawena.
Thanks, Anushka. I hope I'm not butchering your name and I pronounce it right. Cool. I guess we have a couple of questions and flow. I guess you, Umara, and yourself, you sent across a couple of questions. I guess we're just going to go in that flow. Rohan and Nats, if that's all good, I'm just going to ask the question and we can just bounce those ideas if that works.
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome, great. So here's this first question. It says that some students here on this call today are just starting with a first year marketing course, while some of them will be in the fourth year very soon. Now, what are the discrepancies that exist from a uni perspective when it comes to marketing and as compared to when you go into the real world? What are those major discrepancies from uni to real world? Rohan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think something I came across was that a lot of material that we go through at SPJ or any university tends to be very theoretical and tends to lean more on the hows, whys, and the history and why we have social and how social is today. But I think what really helped me personally was digging into courses by Facebook or any of these leading platforms. Like for instance, Google has a lot of free courses to offer. Facebook has some courses to offer. And I think just by going to these courses, you can familiarize yourself with a lot of, with how the platform actually works, which you otherwise wouldn't really know. So if you just rely on something that's very theoretical and then approach a company, you probably would be clueless if they ask you platform specific questions. So I think what really helps then is to just familiarize yourself with all of those various platforms. It could be Snapchat, it could be LinkedIn, or it could be even something like a Google or LinkedIn or anything like that.
What do you think, Nats? I mean, Rohan obviously shared about the various different courses that typically you would expect that we would do at school on top of everything that we're being taught. But other than that, what do you think, Nats?
I would say internships, because honestly, for me, there was so much in terms of courses that I personally struggled because I wasn't a very social media person. I'm not, and I don't really use that. And I was like, this is not a space for me, but what else is there in marketing? And the way to properly put that together was to go through the internships, because after going through that, I literally realized what I studied at uni was less than say 30% of what actually happens in the real world. And that's when I was like, okay, great. There's these many segments. There's this sort of terminology. There's so much stuff that you can just grasp from looking around, talking to people there. So I was definitely a bit shy to go out and like network with people when I just came in, but I would 100% recommend just do it, because that's the only way you're going to find out. And you will find out so many differences because I guess the question also says some people in first year, fourth year. So you're going to be in all these different places and locations as well. So the way people have like their communicating styles or their working styles, that will also be very different. So it just gives you a very good exposure to all of that.
Yeah, and I think I'd just like to add something there. If you're ever struggling to get an internship, or if you're not really getting the right experience despite having that internship, there are a lot of opportunities where you can get platform-centric experience or just experience in general through other ways. Like for instance, Pawena and I did this thing called Google Ad Grants Challenge, where Google basically hooks you up with a nonprofit and then gives you a budget of $10,000 every month. So you get to run campaigns for them. So you don't actually work for Google or any company as such. You're doing everything by yourself. And that really gives you like a very steep learning curve because A, you're not being taught by anyone, you're self-teaching, you're teaching yourself everything. And then B, you work with real budgets in a real company. So I think those kind of experiences also have a lot to offer.
Yeah, and I can certainly attest and sort of, really vouch for that. And to add to your points as well, I feel taking parts in competitions is a huge way to get that initial exposure as to how the real world functions. Now, I know a lot of students may go like, right, but like a competition, what do I do with that? It's still something that's very, you're still having to apply very bookish knowledge. You're still having to do something that's quite research oriented as opposed to very real life. But what I've learned in the process of taking part in a lot of competitions is first, you get to network, which automatically would mean that tomorrow, if you want to reach out for an internship, potentially you would be on the map. And the very fact that you're even participating in something kind of like says a lot about your attitude. I think something that school can only groom you for is to get a good professional etiquette and attitude, but it's up to you to really take the initiative in a lot of things. I think school will never be able to teach you initiative taking. And the major difference between school and the real world is to be very, very self-driven, be extremely self-starting. And also, I mean, obviously, like as Rohan mentioned, the Google Marketing Challenge is a huge starting point for me personally to even make up the choice between whether do I want to go for organic search or whether I want to go for paid search, as simple as that. And I know probably even using this jargon right now may seem extremely silly because potentially you don't have exposure to that yet. But exactly taking part in a competition gives you an indication towards that. I can also attest to what Nats was sharing. And I call Nats, Natalia Nats, and I call Rohan Ro because we were part of the BBA 16 batch together and we're really good friends. But yeah, just to add to Nat's point, for example, I remember we had this digital marketing course in year 3 in Sydney, and we learned this concept about keyword effectiveness index, which is literally KEI. And trust me, it's probably the basis of even understanding what search is about. And I would really think that 30% is actually an accurate number. Because when you go into the real world, you realize that a lot of things are either outdated because first it's marketing and it's digital. And second, there's so many other hypotheses that you can try instead of just going bookish about it. Anybody wants to ask anything on this point? Right? Are we doing questions right away? Or are we doing questions towards the end? Do people want to throw in the questions in the chat in the meantime? I mean, I'm going to let Tanushka and Umara kind of like tell us about that.
I think the members can put in the questions whenever they feel like it. Maybe they could even raise their hands if they want to ask a question. That would be fine.
Awesome. Cool. I mean, do that, everyone. I'll move to the second question that we have.
Vivi has a question.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Yes, I have a question to Pawena. Like, I have participated in some marketing competition, like the L'Oreal Brainstorm, but I think like it's just about like you have to be very creative and like start from nowhere to like to participate in that kind of competition. So, do you recommend what type of competition that we should do, that we should participate?
I participated in the L'Oreal Brainstorm as well.
We did that together. That was so fun.
You want to go first, Nats?
I think it's creative, but I think it's more about application. Like at the end of the day, however creative you are, it's more about how you explain it or how you like talk about that execution or talk about that. So these things are very fun and exciting to get your brain cogs moving in what are the directions that brands are actually doing, what are the kind of things that things are doing in a B2C versus a B2B world. That was also a big eye-opening thing for me to see when we did the L'Oreal brandstorm, because all we saw was the B2C side. But after that, when I read more into it and saw other people's submissions and things like that, I was like, okay, people actually took a very different approach, and people also address the B2B side of it. So yeah, I would say after you finish or submit any of these, also look at other people's submissions, because that is a big eye opener.
Like, but may I ask how did you look at other submission? Like they're not public, that right?
Afterwards they become, so after a
Yeah.
point they do publish some of them they do share, and they share them a lot with the participants. So it depends on what, so most of the things you get via email.
And I definitely agree to that. I think a competition might be creative or highly technical or extremely research based, but at the end of the day, we always have a percentage coverage into different various pillars. For example, I remember when I was doing my L'Oreal brandstorm, we had not yet learned about customer relationships management, which is basically a core marketing, how do you call that module? Is that what it's called in uni? Yeah, cool. And that was something that we learned in year 4. And I remember just going to the competition, having no idea what CRM is, and you get grilled with the panel about, like, what are you going to do with having a database? And as a year 2 student, we definitely did not know what a CRM is. But exactly after that, even before having learned on the subject, you if you have that inquisitive mind, you would go and get the research done for yourself. So I feel there's always a learning opportunity. Even if something seems that it's not going to provide you a lot of wisdom, I think eventually it does. I hope that answers somewhat.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, by the way, like for the person who want to follow marketing, do they need to be like based on based on L'Oreal brainstorm? I say that people need to be like one thing, like they have to be like good at visual. They have to create beautiful visual, or they have to be good at content. So like that is kind of mandatory for the people who want to join marketing, right?
I actually use your curiosity and question to jump on the next question, because it actually kind of bridges it well there. And it asks us to formally introduce the marketing/media industry from a job seeking perspective. And I think I'll just call up on Rohan to give his perspective here first, because I remember when I was in year 3, I was completely confused about, hey, okay, cool, I'm graduating in marketing, but what do I do? Do I have to be good at graphic designing? Do I have to be great at social media content? Do I have to, be extremely good at ad copy and so on? And I know, like, for example, Nats as well shared, she wasn't very keen on, being extremely creative when it comes to marketing. And Rohan came up with this really cool insight where he divided the marketing industry into 4 different pillars. So I'm just going to let Rohan kind of like go into that first.
Yeah, I think just on that, I think what really helps in the beginning is knowing what you want to do within marketing, because I have a lot of people who come to me and ask like, hey, like I want to do marketing, but my next question is, yes, that's great, but like, what do you want to do in marketing? So I think because marketing in itself is somewhat like an ocean, like there can be search, social, programmatic, there can be creative, there can be strategy, there can be client management. There's just so much in it. So I think what really helps is knowing where you want to be. And I think to address Vivi's question, for instance, if you want to do something like if you want to be like a search coordinator or a social coordinator, you don't really need to be creative in that sense. It actually requires more technicality, more knowledge of like platforms, familiarizing yourself with like various different algorithms and how they function and things like that. Whereas if you want to get into like things like, creative or strategy, I think that's when you really need to be a little more creative. But again, even within those spaces, it really depends. So even within strategy, if you're a media strategist, it's again very different from being a creative strategist. And if I talk about just like making or breaking into any of these spaces, I think with media, I think it's very structured. It's very out there. Like a lot of opportunities are there for like becoming a search coordinator or a social coordinator or any different titles that companies might have. But if you compare that space with strategy or creative, I think that space is very unstructured. So you won't really find a lot of like junior strategist roles. You won't find like junior creative roles. And that's particularly because those spaces tend to be more top heavy. So you'll always find people who are more senior in those spaces. So for you to create a role for you'll essentially have to create a role for yourself in those spaces usually. So meeting people for coffees, or just doing courses, which actually help you, get into those spaces where you can talk to the right people. And if you go back to media again, as I mentioned, it's very structured. So I think that's what it's been for me. So yeah, I'll let Nats or Pawena take over now.
Before I let you sort of tell your part of the story, Nats, if I can just add to Rohan's point, because then I can segue into Nats' current role as well. I think to add a bit of a visual to every single jargon that Rohan was using right now, media is everything that has to do with if you're trying to buy ads on TV, or if you're trying to buy ads on a particular digital website, or if you're trying to buy ads on, say, the radio or a podcast. That's what you would term as media. If we talk about, for example, search specifically, so that's everything that has to do with Google ads, that has everything to do with the organic visibility of particular Google search results. If we're saying social, I mean, we are kind of 2 years, 3 years old into the industry. So we say social we say social for short, when it actually is the entire social media spectrum. And exactly to come on to segue to Nats, we have this entire thing called account management and client services, which is a bit more on the admin part of it, or the more coordinating part of it. And I'll let Nats tell us a bit more about client services and how that relates to marketing. It's still super exciting.
Yeah, so for me, I'll tell you about this whole marketing media industry. I didn't understand these terms and jargons in the beginning. How much ever you study them, how much ever you learn them, until you actually start working, you don't know what it means, because sometimes it's even different company to company, because some people are referring to things differently based on their backgrounds. So when I actually started my role, I was like, yeah, great, I love market research, so I'm going to go into a research role. A month into it, I hated it. But I literally realized I only enjoyed the research part of it because we only did it at a uni level. We never did it at like the real work level where, the onus is on you. You're actually responsible for representing that sort of data, and big decisions are made on that. So moving further from all of those things, I tried my hand at media as well. So I was lucky at my role that we were an agency which was growing. So they actually let me trial out the different roles as we were going, and everybody was just kind of filling in shoes for everyone. So when I went through all of these different phases, I realized there was account management, client services, which was more about like client relationships and like project management. It's more about like getting the work done. So like you said, really about the whole creative part, that you have to be focused on content, you have to be really creative or good at like designing or writing. I had the same thing, that like I'm fine at it, but I'm not like great. I'm not like some amazing designer or amazing writer, but I definitely can tell stuff. So it's more about, with this role, what you do more is, it's kind of like the day-to-day client management. You understand their expectations, you set expectations with them and your other teams. So you're sort of like you're the key between the two of them, and that helps your role be more where you're creative, yes, because you're suggesting these strategies. You're the one approving the work before it goes. You're literally the kind of person who's soaking in everything and giving it all out as well. So it's a very wholesome role, I would say, because it's got way too many responsibilities without realizing it. But you're a little bit around the whole content side. You're also going to be across the whole media side, because at the end of the day, you are the one who has to explain it to the client. You're even across the whole strategy side of, say, taking the research, building the different sorts of strategies, putting it together. So there's a lot of elements involved in it. And the key thing I would say for this is just your personal skills and soft skills. Like the more you do certain sorts of roles and responsibilities, it develops and you understand whether you have a knack for this, do you enjoy it, or you want to move up. Like it's pretty dynamic, because you do a little bit, you're still set for more areas. So yeah, definitely don't shy away from client services account management, because you'll be doing a lot.
Yep. And I guess exactly now, I wish I had that kind of insight even 2 years before graduating. I think it was sort of a bit late when I got that insight, because obviously I was just like, oh, I'm doing marketing because probably I don't want to do finance, or I don't want to do entrepreneurship. And I was just like, cool, I'm doing marketing. But then when it came to a point where, cool, job market, what do I want to do? You see tons of ads of things that go like marketing coordinator, or things that go like junior strategist, or digital creator, or graphic design. And you just look at the job description and you're like, yeah, I can do it, but can I do it well? Oh, yes, I can do it, but am I going to be employable given however much I have in my portfolio? So this is actually one of the other questions that we have. When we went into the job seeking process, knowing that we're graduating from marketing, how exactly did you guys go about doing your research and choosing eventually which pillar you were comfortable in or with, at a personal level, at an employability level? And also if we can probably talk a bit to the Australian marketplace as well. Rohan?
Yeah, so I think most of my internships were search and social. So I was honestly open to both the roles. I didn't have intensive experience across both, but I had been exposed to both. So, and that also helped me have more options. So when I was applying, I could apply to more companies. I could even look at roles which were letting me do both. Specializing in one area has its own benefits, and specializing in both the areas also has its own benefits. So I think it ultimately boils down to where you see yourself or where you want to be. A lot of times when you take up your first role, you don't really know what you want to do. And sometimes being a migrant, and I believe for all of you, when you come to Australia, it's very hard to like get into companies because of visa complications, because of sometimes it's just logistically, because SPJ has a different calendar year as opposed to other universities. It just makes it harder for you to get a job. So sometimes it's also about just getting the chance to go in rather than just selecting the best possible first job. And I think my criteria personally was getting a good brand initially so that I could just build on from there. Whether that was internally or externally. So I got into this, one of the big agencies. I started off as a social coordinator, and realistically we graduated when COVID was at its peak. So people were getting laid off, so we didn't really have much of a choice. It was very important for us to like hold on to something. So my tip here would be like definitely have a choice, like have 2 or 3 priorities. Okay, if this is my first choice, like this is the second thing, and then see what you get. And then I believe like your first job, if the brand's really good and if you're somewhere in the media space, I think you should be good, because sometimes even if you want to start with social but you get a search job, the way they function is very similar. Of course the platforms are different and the way they function are very different, but then at the same time you'll notice that the way you learn both the platforms, or the way you function across both the platforms, they tend to be very similar. So even if you start off in one of these spaces, you should be good.
Nat, what about your journey when it came to job searching?
Yes, my journey is, like I mentioned before, was a bit of trying my hand at everything, because I wasn't sure of what to do, because we were literally the COVID batch. And when we were doing this and applying and stuff, the kind of responses, the kind of rejections that were coming through for no reason at all, just because everyone was getting laid off. So it is, yes, disheartening, but after a point, you just like crash apply for everything, because you just don't know what's going to go through where. Like for the longest time, I was very selective about the fact that, okay, I think I want to do more of market research. I want to do more of like content related, like those like those approvals and like that sort of stuff. But as it went on, I applied for everything. And the more conversations I had with interviewers, I understood more about the job scope. So I guess that was a way for me to actually learn about what is it actually that they expect out of me in this role. And one of the best things about my current job, and the reason I took it at the time was, so I currently work at a B2B marketing agency, and our clients are all focused on like tech. And that was definitely not a space I saw myself in at all. I was all about B2C. I was all about like FMCG and things like that. And at that time, I just took the job because we needed to. And they said that like, it's fine. The best thing they told me was, we don't expect you to know anything. We're going to teach you everything. We're going to train you. And I guess that's honestly a lot that you can ask for, because they're paying you to get to learn stuff, which is great. And through that is when I actually got to know a lot more. So I would say be open to more opportunities. And even I initially was like, I need a big company, need a big brand, need to make sure that it's a well-reputed company and things like that. But my company was actually relatively small. It was in its second year of starting in Australia when I joined it. And I would say it was definitely a great decision for me, because that was the only way I could try out the different roles. Because otherwise, at my internships were at bigger agencies. So they were all very segregated and siloed, that, okay, this department just does this department just does this. Versus in my actual job, because I was doing everything, the exposure helped me learn more. So interesting journey on that, and worked out. So I'm in a new space than I ever thought I would work. So you don't know how things will surprise you. B2B is actually not as dry as it was made out to be to me earlier.
It's interesting that you say that, because my journey was slightly different. I was very adamant from the beginning that I want to work in small spaces. I wanted to work with startups, and I really wanted to evolve in very small team sizes. And I guess as a default of that, even the nature of the internships that I took was always at startups. Because I always thought that when I would graduate, I would eventually join a small to medium-sized company that I wanted to scale up eventually. That has always been part of my drive. And obviously, given the COVID situation, a lot of startups were actually sort of halting onto recruitment. And I found myself at a bit of a standstill as well, where what happens when you're choosing your internships. For example, I mean, Rohan, I know you did a lot, like Rohan did a lot of internships in really big agencies. Nats was also like straddling. I think you had a bit of a hybrid thing going on.
I had a mix of two, yeah. I did some startups, something.
Exactly. Whereas I only had startups going on. And I think that in itself tells you a lot of different journeys. But what I've learned out of that, in even choosing the kind of industry you want. Okay, so I'll just take a couple of steps back. I think that when you're job seeking as a marketing graduate, there are three things that you have to be absolutely clear on. The number one thing is the size of the company that you choose to join. And when I say the size of the company, I'm literally pivoting towards either a startup or medium-sized company or a large-sized company. It's very important that you at least have an idea of where you're going towards. The second thing is the industry that you want to be in. And when I mean industry, it means the entire range of client portfolio. At times when you'll be doing an internship at an agency or probably an in-house company, for example, you only have exposure to, say, tech, or you only have exposure to education, or you only have exposure, say, to FMCG. So already kind of understanding, even from an internship perspective, which industry you're trying to fit into is very important. So like the first one, the size, so the kind of team dynamic, the kind of interpersonal relationships you're very good at. The second one being exactly your industry that you want to be part of, so the kind of client portfolio. And the last one, your function. It's extremely important for you to at least have an idea and a motivation, whether you want to go into account management, client services, market research, social media, search, strategy. Extremely important for you to have these 3 points of clarity and to start working towards that. We had an unfortunate event, obviously, because of COVID, and that kind of like sort of foiled our looking forward as to how to get a job. But I think these 3 points, as long as you have that in your horizon of decision making, it should better help you when you're job seeking in the marketing industry. did I miss anything that Ro or Nats you want to add on?
No,
Actually, when
spot
it
on.
comes to something, you spoke about like the size of the company that matters, right? Like you want to pick which size of the company would suit you the best. But and it's pretty clear of the difference between startups and a really large company. But could you please go a little bit into the nuances between a medium-sized company and to which side it leans towards more?
Good question.
I
I
think
would probably take. Sorry, go ahead.
no,
Anyone take a stab?
yeah, I was just going to say that. So, for instance, with my current company, we are 60 people, and that which would be a medium-sized company. But then globally, we are 2,000 people. So what happens here is that we always work with the entire network. So even if it feels more startup-ish and more medium-sized, it actually isn't. So I think it really depends on the nature of the company and its global network at the same time.
Yeah, agree to what Rohan said, because that's sort of also a way that my company functions is that, yeah, in Australia, when we started, I was probably like the sixth or seventh employee joining the team. But when we looked at the APAC office is what works together. And there we were about 30. And now we're probably at triple that size or more in just this region. So the growth is a lot at that specific time. So look at the kind of role that you're getting into at that point. Because with smaller agencies and smaller companies as such, look at who they're working with, or like say if they've partnered up with someone, or say if they have like parent agencies or parent companies or something like that. Because a lot of times all of these like companies tend to work together. So maybe just that particular brand or that particular company that the name of which you might be thinking of joining or working with shows that it has only like 5-6 employees, when technically they're probably like 30. But just because of a name discrepancy, you don't know, or you can't even tell that there's more. So definitely be open to all different sizes and actually look at what those different sizes mean at that stage.
Yeah, and I'll add another point here, which is around clients. And clients never work with just one agency. So if you look at Nike or Google, they work with RGA, but they also work with 5 to 6 other agencies at the same time. And a lot of times you'll see that these clients are working with very small companies because this happened to specialize in one area. Like it could be CRM or it could be something like that. Whereas sometimes they just work with very big companies depending on what part of the service they want help with.
I think that's actually a good cue. Yeah, go Nas.
No, I was going to say, quick one to the person who had a very interesting message. Hi, guys, can I get an internship, please? I'm poor. Fun fact, most internships are unpaid. So sad to let you know, you might continue staying poor with your internships. So fun fact about that. Pause, go ahead.
Yeah, no, like I do second that. Unless you're sort of like freelancing a bit, which you really have to be darn good at it to already start freelancing when you're in uni. But I highly do recommend people freelancing in uni as well, especially if, to Vivi's point, you're looking to be more on the creative side. Starting to freelance as soon as possible and building a portfolio could help you not being broke because you'll be paid for it. And at the same time, garner experience. So that's a tip for you, TAMID 100%.
And you learn way more if you're a freelancer, because freelancers don't get insurance benefits and things like that.
True. I actually wanted to bounce off if the exact conversation we were having to address a bit more the nature of sizes of companies and teams with regards to whether you are joining an agency or you're joining an in-house marketing team as part of a company. So let's just take, for example, Google or Apple, and I'll try to relate that to Rohan's point. So what Apple could do potentially, Apple would have its own marketing team, right? So you as a student, when you're graduating and you are an amazing candidate, you can either choose to join Apple's marketing in-house team, or you can choose to figure out which agency is servicing Apple. Now, even Apple is going to have different segments where it's currently putting its ad forwards. It could be doing search ads. It could be doing social ads. It could be doing strategy. It could be doing something that is completely just about brand activation. So more of the offline marketing part. So now your duty as a student who is actively seeking to look for either you want to be in-house or an agency person would be to figure out what are the different agencies servicing Apple. And that's exactly to Rohan's point. No single company in the world has a single agency servicing it. So for example, let's say there's
Apple.
Sorry?
Apple only has one agency.
Yeah, but like we can't disclose that at this point. I mean, I guess like we can't, right? Anyway, but it's very important to really do your research in the sense that there are a lot of agencies, right? You should already know what are the top players in the industry. For example, you might have Group M, you might have Publicists, you might have, help me out with the names, like there's so many names, guys.
Ogilvy, TBWA, IPG.
Exactly, like all those big brands, right? Like those are almost like the top servicing agencies in the world. Now, even in themselves, they themselves have a lot of micro agencies. So Rohan, if you want to take one example from Publicis, perhaps.
Yeah, so like Publicis has a media side and a creative side. Media side would be like Spark, there's Digitas, there's Performix, there's Mercerbell, and the list just keeps going on. Like they have a lot, I think they have 8 to 10 media agencies, whereas on the creative side, they have Saatchi and Saatchi. Then on the tech side, they have Publicis Sapient. So just within Publicis, you'll find like a ton of different agencies doing different things.
Yeah. So to get to Rohan, like to every single name that Rohan mentioned, it's already really good as a student if you familiarize yourself with the different parent companies and those brand names. I would bet my life that probably even in year 3, most of our students are not even familiar with those parent companies and those parent agencies. So it's important also, to Anushka's point, in you deciphering what is the size of the company that you want to choose, it's also about the size of the agency that you want to choose and the kind of network and the kind of client portfolio that come with them. So that was just to add to that. Nats, did you have something in this one or?
Yeah, sort of. So one more thing with agency and in-house is my work bestie. It came from the actual, say, company side and like was an in-house marketing person, versus when I started from agency. So we do often obviously talk about how it's working, what's your experience and stuff like that. So one big thing is when you work with an agency, you're working on several different brands, a lot of different industries. So one big learning that I had was I actually understood the different ways in which they function. What is the different kind of messaging that they all want to have? What is the kind of programs that different kind of companies want to run? Say some companies are focused on how they want their media to run, versus some companies are more focused on like strategic programs. So that was a very different kind of learning experience over there, with the two kinds of, like not two, actually many different kinds of things. So that's what with agency I felt like there was many of those. And though clients work with many different agencies also work with other agencies. So that was a difference of experience that I had versus my workmate had, where she was just like, they work with agencies, they don't work with obviously other clients. So it's all they know about is their specific client, which they're obviously the master at. And the better part of those things is more about like decision making on what they want to do with the budget and what they want to do. So that's more about them thinking about how they can generate the ROI of this campaign at the end, versus agencies is more like execution or like building on what the marketing person gives you. So there's two perspectives. Neither of the sides are like bad or anything. Both of them are great. It depends on obviously where you get it, the kind of things that you want to do, and the kind of companies you end up working with. And the more you'll bounce off and you'll change roles and things like that, you will kind of get a better idea of that.
I'll just extend on your point, Nats. And I think it's extremely important that, like that's really brought to light. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that at least for the larger part of time, most people start from agencies and then eventually graduate into in-house because of the technical capabilities and the kind of maturity you gain in an agency that you can then bargain for a better pay package when you go client side. Versus if you start at client side, you end up not learning as much because you're more on the executional part of things, and probably not starting as much as a good pay package as opposed to if you started from a client, an agency side transiting into client side. Yeah.
Yeah, agree. Because over here, you're going to learn way too much. You're going to be thrown in the deep end. But when you learn that, you're definitely getting way more skills and like those technical nitty-gritties that you wouldn't necessarily have on like the client side. And then after that, when you go back on client side, it's like easier for you because it's like you've done the hard part. So you kind of understand how both sides work.
I'll have to agree for sure, because I remember when I had my first job, obviously during COVID, we were just taking whatever we could get our hands on. I started in-house and I did not enjoy it at all. First, because it wasn't challenging enough. It was just tons of managing, not being able to learn enough, not being able to go back home with a sense of satisfaction of having been able to, unlock a super amazing, great challenge. And at the same time, when you get into the client side of things, you have to take a more of an educational role. You'll end up figuring out that a lot of people don't exactly know in-house what marketing is about. And you will have to take that active sort of a sense of, hey, this is what you can do and this is what it means. I remember I was having this chat with somebody who was in-house in terms of client side, and just making them understand the basic difference between impressions and clicks was such a hard time. And also it would matter what is the age group that you're working with, etc. But at the same time, I would say that starting out in an agency makes you a bit more robust and resilient in learning those skills as opposed to when you go in-house. However, I may be wrong in the sense that perhaps for some people going in-house is better suited. So it really depends on you having the self-awareness to figure that out for yourself.
What Pawena mentioned about the age groups is definitely key, because one more thing with the Australian market to also understand is agency side tends to usually be younger versus client side tends to usually be a relatively older. And that's also probably where you see the difference of ways of working, difference of the kind of programs or the kind of jobs you do, the difference in the culture of the places as well. So the more, obviously you'll have conversations with people, but those environments will be fostered based off of the way the people work. So I guess that would be a good thing to consider or look at, is the age groups of the people that you're going to be with.
Definitely. Let's jump into one of the other questions that was there, and it's about the Australian marketing industry and the media market, basically. I have tons to say, but I'll let Rohan, if you want to go first.
We were just having a chat about this yesterday. Both Pawena and I were complaining about how the Australian market doesn't have like big budgets. They do a lot of work which is not very challenging. It's more in the comfort zone of like brands, and they don't. And this would also be because the Australian market is not very big. Like we are 26 million in all. So because of the impression size that a lot of brands can get from the country, I think the budgets and in terms of like how outrageous campaigns can be, like that just tones down with the size of the market. And I think overall, like the media landscape here is, it is pretty booming at the same time. Like I wouldn't say it's not a great place to be or like it's not booming or anything like that. I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially for migrants like us who want to like enter media specifically. Client side is always tougher to get into. Like you'll notice when you come here that not a lot of clients want people on visas, and that's because growth on the client side is much slower than agency side. Like you could become a manager on the agency side in like 2 to 3 years, whereas client side you'll probably need 6 to 8 years to become a manager. So just seeing that sort of growth curve or learning curve, agencies usually tend to take people even on a 2-year visa or a 1-year or 3-year visa, whereas client people, like even with a 3-year visa or 2-year visa, they would probably not want to take you on board. So yeah, one tip would be like if you want an easier way in, and if you just want to start quickly and just get your hands dirty, I think agencies are a great place to be, and they're also more welcoming when it comes to migrants, especially in Australia.
Yeah, one thing I'll also add on that from what Rohan said, that's spot on. For me, also one of the big reasons of choosing the companies and looking at that was I was looking at coming to Australia and obviously getting a PR after that. So looking at the prospects of the companies as to are they open to sponsoring people? Are they keen to do that sort of stuff? So from a job seeking perspective, definitely look at like yourself in terms of what is the kind of where you want to be, how you want to do this, because that was a very important part of it. And there were so many companies who literally would be like, sorry, we just don't do that at all. So then that's fine. But like that, you should kind of have your criteria set of what are you willing to compromise and what are you not willing to compromise. So for me, everything else was like, yeah, okay, I can discuss, or I have a range, or I have these sort of things that I can talk about. But a sponsorship was kind of like a non-negotiable. So that's kind of how you like from a job seeking perspective, keep your criteria of what you need and what you want, because that will help you narrow down things and get a better idea of are you getting your best out of, or you getting the best thing for you that you need.
You also need to be mindful about what you're getting in terms of your pay and what you're getting in terms of work experience, because even if a company agrees to sponsor you at some point, like it's not written down on paper. So it's very important for you to check with the government guidelines. Are you hitting those sort of criterias? Because to get sponsored, you need to be earning more than $62,000. And if a company's just not promoting you for like a year and a half, and you're sitting at somewhere like 50 or 55K, you won't even get sponsored, even if they did happen to agree to sponsor you at the beginning of the employability conversation. So always be very mindful of like what your salary is, and if you're actually going to get growth in the next 1 year before you actually need sponsorship.
I guess I'll add to that, obviously all fair points from Rohan and Natalia. What I can also say is that the media industry in Australia, especially Sydney, is extremely small. And what I mean by that is not that it's small in size, but not small in terms of like aspirational kind of work that you can do, but rather in terms of the number of people working in it. There is this famous street here in Sydney, it's called Harris Street. You've got this bustling corner down in Surrey Hills, which is right around the central business district. When you start seeking a job or when you start meeting people, it's like everybody knows everyone. So people are easily going to start recognizing your faces. People are going to very easily start recognizing your name. So you have to be extremely careful with how you're presenting yourself professionally in this environment. It's super easy to get a reference. It's super easy for you to get talked about, both positively and negatively. So I would say that at least for the Sydney context, I can't talk to the Melbourne context as much, but for the Sydney context, it's a very small world in a sense that you can just bump into anybody at any point in time and they would know you.
With sponsorship, one more point would be like a lot of people start off in finance or supply chain or some other field and then happen to make their way into marketing. What happens then is because you don't have enough experience in one space, when you apply for sponsorship, it can get rejected because, or the company wouldn't even apply because you wouldn't have enough experience within marketing. So if you do plan on staying in the country, I would say just be very sure of what you want to do from day one. Otherwise, it just becomes tougher and tougher to make yourself stay.
Yeah, definitely check all those like visa regulations, PR regulations, all those things ahead of time. Though those keep changing, the base crux of it does more or less stay the same. So if you're planning on like switching, think twice about that if it's for the sponsorship purposes, versus if you're going ahead with like, see, if you're in marketing and you go some different areas of marketing, that still sort of works. Like if you're in finance and you do different areas, that still works. But if you do like the big switches of finance to marketing, or like say finance, I don't even know, something completely different, like I don't know, tech or something, you're gone, like in terms of visas. So definitely be super sure about that.
Yep. Anybody has any questions specifically to the Australian marketing industry or media industry? Just specific to Australian? in case we're missing out a particular angle.
Yeah.
Go, Dave.
Raise hand. Yeah.
Go
Can I
for it.
speak? Hello.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go
Right.
ahead.
Thanks, Rohan. So my question is open to everyone. So as market research is a very big field, is being open since like 6-7 years from the start of e-commerce. So is there a big opportunity in specific to Australia, because Australia mentioned is a small marketplace. So is there an opportunity to grow in working in market research in Australia?
Market research.
When you say market research, like what sort of research are you looking? Are you looking at creative research, quant research, qual research, more on the like competitor finance business side of things, or is it more marketing, like
More towards finance research.
more towards finance? What was your question again about like whether there are opportunities for
As
market?
in if I individual want to work in market research, specifically to finance market research, is
Yeah.
there a opportunity for me to grow understanding the domestic market of Australia?
If I can just take that one row,
Yeah.
like, listen, are you talking about market research from a stock market perspective, or you're talking about the marketing of financial products?
Marketing of financial products.
Right. Okay. Okay. I'm just digesting your question, but Rohan, if you want to go.
Yeah, so a perfect example here would be finder.com.
Yeah.
What they basically sell financial products, and they are in a way a marketing company because they're marketing and selling different financial products to people. So do have a look at that company. They have a lot of like roles in research, a lot of roles in content. And I think any role that you go into, especially specifically when it comes to finance, you'll have to do a lot of research before you make any claims or statements. So even if you're a content strategist or you're a media person, you'll always have to begin with research. Again, because like even us as marketers, like there's a lot of research that goes into it. If it's media, like you always look at audiences, sizes, budgets, and things like that, channels, and whether it's marketing financial products, I think that's when you need to look at regulatory things and like a lot of legal statements and stuff.
Another thing with research I'll also say is look at data as an aspect of things, because in a lot of these things, like you need a lot of like data to support it. So your research might be like, say, market research of those products, might be market research of the industries and stuff like that. But to be able to actually put those like to make it make sense to other people, or to actually have like to explain your claims, look at the whole data analysis part of things. Like obviously not to that extent that you would need to do for like proper data science kind of things, but definitely a good area to explore and add to your skill set if you know that this is an area that I want to deep dive into.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much.
I think we're sort of covered with all the questions, Tanishka and Omega. Just let me know if I've missed anything right now. There's just the last one that says any advice for students, whether they are in the first or fourth year. But I guess if we want to use the remaining amount of time for just like open floor questions, you guys let me know.
Yeah, I think we can keep the floor open for questions. Maybe you guys can start with the advice part of it, and then answer any other questions that come through.
Sure. I think for me, I would say be extremely aware of yourself to figure out what exactly you want to do with the area of marketing you're going to go in. Remember that those three things, the industry, the function, and the size of the client portfolio you're willing to be part of. And associated with that, know your worth. As a student graduating from SPJ, compared to a local student, how much is your worth? How much should you be asking for? Educate yourself on your pay packages, educate yourself on all the nitty-gritties associated with that. That would be like my number one advice.
My advice is around Pawena's advice, which is because we're all from SPJ, what happens is like there are a lot of pros and cons. Obviously, local students do have that brand benefit and do have that sort of edge over us because they all happen to graduate at the same time, whereas we graduate in a very different cycle. And I think the advantage that we have is the whole Tri-City program. And a lot of students think like, okay, if it's just the first year, let's just enjoy or relax and not do much. Okay, it's the second year, let's not take up internships. We still have like 2 more years. But I think just by doing that, you lose your advantage. And that's our only advantage, that we go to all of these different countries and we have that visa and we can actually get that experience from those different countries. So my advice would be like never waste a single year, like always try to do some sort of get some exposure, some experience from each of the countries you go to.
Yeah, I guess I completely agree with what Rohan Pawena said. 100% take up any opportunity you get, because if you don't do it, you won't even know whether you like it or not. So that's a way for you to find out. And this was one of the things that I was told at work is, in terms of the skill set we bring, is the fact that we have this kind of attitude where we're interested to like find out more. Like we have this like different sort of attitude versus, from what I have been told, so don't quote me, but it's basically the fact that people who are here, they're more complacent versus we're more like we're more into exploring new things and trying things out. So definitely attitudes towards work is very different. So they're very interested to work with us. So go ahead, take up the opportunities. You'll never know until you actually try it. And if you don't like it, doesn't matter. You can always change it, but not a big change. Like take baby steps at a time, and like you'll obviously find your way. And I would say focus on your soft skills, because that is an area that will literally help you in every department you go with, be it with networking, be it with like just time management, like even little sort of things like the presentation skills. Like obviously from SPJ we do like tons of these presentations and stuff, but it's different when you're actually in a work setting and you will realize all these things. So just focus on your soft skills, because I think that's one of the best things that will like take you wherever you gotta go.
I have a small question to Natalia. Like, how did you find out that you are interested in market research?
In what?
Market research. I see your LinkedIn profile that you work a lot in the market research. Yeah. So how did you find your interest in that?
So it was more about like, I enjoyed the research that we were doing at college. I enjoyed like, so I did the IB program before coming in to college, and that was literally all about research. And I actually really enjoyed that part of it. So I was like, yeah, okay. And it all kind of just continued from there on. So my first internship that I had, that was also at EY at consulting position, where I was learning more about these things. And that is again focused on like research. The more I kept doing it, I enjoyed it until realizing that internships, uni, the level at which you do the research is very different from what you need to do when you actually are working. And the kind of things you research, like say it might be very qualitative research that you do at those levels, but as you go higher, there's more like quantitative research. There's more like intense stuff with data. Like I was telling, I think Dave, because he was interested in market research. Like there is so much more to it that I honestly felt a bit like intimidated by it, because I didn't like the data side of things, because I just found it a bit head on for me. So that's kind of where I realized that maybe this is not a space for me to work in. This is definitely an interest area. So I can use those skills to enhance other stuff at work, but that can't be my core focus area. And also one more thing you look at is the way of working, because when you look at research, it's more like you're by yourself, you're going into a deep dive, you're doing those sorts of things, versus in my current role, it's more about like talking to people, like having conversations, briefing people, and those sort of things. And I enjoyed the whole human part of it a lot more, because I just guess that's what appealed to me a bit more, and like getting to work with different kinds of people, different kind of challenges. So that was more my kind of way of working.
Yeah, thank you.
Doesn't look like anyone else has any questions. Oh, Daniel. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question to all of you. It's actually two questions. So, how eager are marketing agencies with regard to hiring of interns? I'm sure like all of you have worked at marketing agencies. So how eager are they to take in interns? And if you work at an agency as an intern, is there like a lot of scope to experiment with different areas? Because for me, I'm interested mainly in the branding part of it, you know, designing the brand build proposals and so on and so forth. You get that scope to experiment with different fields and areas when you're in an agency.
Rohan, I'll let you go first.
Okay. So I'll talk about what's happened to me personally. When I was in Dubai, it was really hard for me to get myself an internship at any agency. I wasn't seeing many openings for interns at agencies. And I think Dubai has a very common concept called Vasta, which is basically referrals. A lot of people get into these agencies through those referrals, through contacts and things like that, which makes it very hard for people like us to, get ourselves internships. And sometimes a lot of these roles are never advertised, like they just happen to be filled out by some way or the other through some institutions, or like, as I mentioned, Vasta. So I think what really helped me in Dubai was reaching out to see the senior management of various agencies. Like you can always chat to them about various campaigns, what your perspective is about something that they've done and how that could be better according to you. And I think because you've got interest in branding and that kind of stuff, you can always like do some research and make suggestions as to how a brand could do something better. And I think that's a great way of just having that conversation starter. Whereas I think when I compare that experience to Australia, I think Australia has a ton of different structured internships when it comes to agencies. So like Publicis, for instance, has 2 cycles every year. This was pre-COVID. I'm not sure as to where they are now, but they had 2 cycles of internships. One started in January, which was their winter internship, and the other one was in July, which was their summer internship. And the winter one was more media, and the summer one was more creative and more strategy. So depending on what you really want to do, I think target those cycles and have a look at like when these internships happen every year. Even MNC Saatchi has this thing called Open House, where they get in 50 interns virtually on board. And then based on a project, whoever does really well, they end up hiring like 2 or 3 people as actual interns who come into the office. So just go on LinkedIn and just search for like internships in Sydney. I'm sure like a lot of these conversations are going to show up, and then you can just, mark them in your calendar or something.
What I would say to that one is I tried applying to all of these internships and all of that stuff. Honestly, I had no luck with that because not many people were keen on internships, and they didn't even know SPJ's name, to be honest. So a lot of people were just like hesitant on even calling you in for like internships, and not many people really cared. After a point, I started applying to actual job roles. Like this was probably me sitting in like my third year or fourth year, applying to full-time jobs. And that's when they respond to you, because that's when they're not interested in your uni experience, versus as soon as they see job application, they're interested in your previous internships and that job experience and like skills and that sort of stuff. So that was what I realized. That was a good gateway for me to enter, because as soon as I spoke to them, I was like, I'm keen, I can do this, but I would have to come at an intern level. And they were obviously way more happy because they were like, yeah, great, we don't have to pay you. And they're still getting work done. So obviously those perspectives worked out on both sides. And I got my foot in and I could do whatever that happened. And obviously, I think being honest with them about what your skill sets are, what you're looking to get out of the internship, I guess don't be afraid in the interview. Like, be honest, be real about what you want. That's what I asked them, that like I'm looking to explore more roles. So in my internship, I kind of did this for like 6 months or so, and every month they changed my department. So I worked with a new team, I worked with a new manager, I worked in a new space altogether. And that was a very good internship, very good experience. So I guess it just comes from talking to your team. Like just tell the person what you're really looking for, and they'll help you find it. Maybe not everything, but you'll get something out of it.
Does that answer your question, Daniel?
It does. I have more clarity now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely conclude and say that there's a lot of appetite for internship in Sydney. Unfortunately, it seems to be more inclined towards the local universities. But I like, for example, I would definitely like agree with Nats and Rohan both. It's a matter of like you yourself putting your foot into the door. Like, for example, like my very first internship, I literally kind of went on a coffee date on LinkedIn with a couple of people, and I was just like, I'll do it for you for free. Did a sample of work for them in advance and kind of like literally sold myself to be able to do the work. So it does take that extra mile to go.
Right. I'll keep all of this in mind. Thank you so much.
No worries.
And as will I, Daniel. I think this was a really productive discussion, especially since I am a fourth year and I'll be graduating in 1 month, and so will Daniel. But I'm sure the first, second, and third years also had a lot to learn, and this has given them a newfound perspective for this entire area. And moving forward, they'll be able to learn things from a different perspective as well. So yeah, I'd like to thank Pawena, Natalia, and Rohan. Thank you all so much for coming here today. And thanks to all the members from Marketing and More and TAMID for coming here to attend this webinar. Thank you once again, and hope you all have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you.